On today's show, I sit down with Mike Medici, scout for the Texas Rangers, and we get his thoughts and his opinion on how this coronavirus will impact professional team, professional draft, and what advice he has for the players.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and today I'm sitting down with Texas Rangers scout Mike Medici. Mike has been a scout for 11 years with the Toronto Blue Jays and now the Texas Rangers. Mike also owns Scout School 360, an online virtual school where he teaches and develops anyone interested in becoming a scout. Mike, how are you, sir?
Good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good, man. You know, making the most out of the situation we are in. Being shut down isn't fun. So with the time, we figured we would answer some questions that a lot of people have. And you being an MLB scout and having some insight, we figured we would try to get some of your thoughts and your comments on the effect of this coronavirus.
Yeah, it's really hard right now. And I really feel for the players, obviously. You know, we're waiting on a lot of things to come through as far as, you know, what's going to happen with the draft. How are we going to proceed? You know, once kind of all this passes, you know, like the high school kids, that seems to be the only season that's probably still up in the air, especially up here I'm in the Midwest. So, you know, we play a little bit later, but I do think at some point that might end up being canceled. So it's unfortunate. These kids are going to end up losing their senior seasons and they can't get that back. You know, for the college kids, you know, initially the NCAA came out and said they were going to grant another year, which, you know, right away you're like, okay, that's great. But then when you kind of step back and start looking at it, like, yeah, that's going to be crazy. So when it comes to the scholarships, the rosters, you know, so I know D2 just came out. This came out actually not shortly ago, that they are awarding seniors an additional year, but not everybody else.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a little bit of a game changer from the pro side, you know, because the way we were looking at it was if everybody gets another year, that basically everybody's like a redshirt junior. And now when it comes to the draft, you know, the players have a little bit more leverage as juniors when normally it's, you know, hey, you're most likely you want to come out and sign, or, you know, you can go back as a senior and, you know, you get treated like a senior, which unfortunately, you know, you have no leverage.
Yeah.
So D1 we're waiting on. I pretty much think it's going to be the same, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. You know, all this is kind of slowly starting to trickle out as they come up with some plan. But, you know, people got to remember, like, they're going to move scholarships up next year. They have to.
Yeah.
But if they award everybody an extra year, how are we going to get that scholarship back in line with where it's been at? You know, which unfortunately is kind of low for where it should be.
Right.
But they don't really have a plan on raising it.
Yeah, I was just talking to a guy the other day, and we were talking about how this is going to be a mess, and it's going to be a mess for years to come if they don't. And I don't know. I don't know if you can do this right. I don't know how, but if you do it wrong, it's going to be a mess for years to come.
Mess. Yeah, and that's, you know, it came out maybe 2 days ago that, you know, our commissioner is planning on potentially canceling the draft. I don't know how that ever happens. You know, everybody's throwing around ideas like, hey, push it back. And why don't we do it in July? Or why don't we have a fall season and then hold the draft later in the fall? Which it all sounds great from a college standpoint because, you know, the players can play and they'll have a little bit of a season. But, you know, let's start looking from a rule standpoint. So most people probably wouldn't know this rule. I didn't even know it until I started really working in the game. But if you're a sophomore in college and you turn 21, 45 days following the draft, you are deemed eligible for that year. So this year, the draft's a little bit early, and it changes every year. So sometimes it benefits, sometimes it hurts.
Right.
So if your birthday right now is, say like July 3rd, you turn 21, you're eligible. Now, let's say we move the draft back.
Oh, man.
Now, how many more guys does that make eligible?
Yeah, wow.
So that's something that we got to keep in mind. And, same thing with just canceling the draft. We do a lot of work on, players' age. And every year a player's older, it just hurts them.
Right.
It kind of stacks the chips against them. It's a young man's game, and it really has become a young man's game in these last few years. So, if everybody decides, hey, I'm just going to go back, or we're going to cancel the draft and send them back, it's really going to just kind of hurt some guys. I think you'd look at a very high school heavy draft next year. The guys are going to take the for sure college players, take all the high school players we like, and then, eventually we'll get on to some of the other guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's still a lot of moving parts to figure this out. I can't see them canceling the draft. Honestly, I think my guess, and this hasn't even come out, but we're going to proceed as draft is scheduled.
Yeah.
And I know many are going to think that's crazy. And how can you have a draft when there's no spring season?
Yeah.
That's what I've been getting asked. And I just put a blog post up on my site just to explain that. So the 2019 draft happens. All right, great. We sign our players. Literally the next day, we are out looking at 2020s.
Right.
There is no break. And, because that's just the way it works. We're in the middle of our pro season. The weather's warm. Obviously, there's games being played. And, we have to turn the page that quick. And we start looking at them. So, throughout all last summer, we're traveling all over the place, looking at all these high school kids with different travel tournaments, national showcases, national events. So we get a really good feel with a lot of information in the summer for high school guys. And then for the college players, you have your Cape Cod, your Northwood League, your Coastal Plain League, you have these summer leagues where we get a lot of data. We also, some teams do scout them more heavily than others. And then in the fall, we have scout days. We have now the NCAA allows 4 outside competition games. So, for me, I try to attend all those that I can, because it's just, they give you 4 games, but what they do is they play one game, maybe 15 innings.
Yeah.
So you get a ton of looks. You see all the pitchers. So we have information to go off of. In the spring, after doing all that work, you're really going in the spring to say, yes, this guy is still what I believe he was in the fall or the summer.
Yeah.
This guy made a jump. This guy really worked over winter break, and he's really changed his body, stuff like that. And guys go up and down, but for the most part, we kind of know what these guys are going in.
Yeah.
So we can still proceed, and I think have a successful draft.
Yeah.
Given the information we've accumulated over that time.
What about the guy, like, and I know this has happened before, is the guy that just comes out of nowhere? He hit the growth spurt, yep. And he really tapped into his potential, but he doesn't have that spring and then that enough look for guys to really say, okay, yeah, we want to gamble on him. Those guys get hurt a little bit.
Definitely. And there's words of possibly shortening the draft a little bit. So really just because we're going to go in with less information, we're going to go after the main targets that we have information on, and it does. It's going to hurt. We call them like pop-up guys that, like you said, just come on out of nowhere or hit a growth spurt or, in most cases really work their tail off over the off season to give themselves and put themselves in the best situation possible for the spring. That side's unfortunate because they're most likely, going to go to college. For those guys that really start to come on, part of me would even say consider junior college, keep yourself eligible right. If professional baseball is really what you want to do. But yeah, so what I have this huge master list of all the players I've seen throughout all last summer, all fall, and it's big. And what I had to do as soon as this all happened was I had to trim that down. And I basically looked at These are guys I have looks on. These are guys that I've, met with. I have conviction to say I would still take this guy given the situation we're in where we're not going to see a game this spring.
Yeah.
We're in a regular year. I'll go try to see as many of them as possible. And one or two of them probably will, like you said, have popped.
Yeah.
But you don't have the looks. And unfortunately, you're just going to have to pass on those guys.
Yeah, you said a couple things that I want to reiterate. You said for those guys, you would actually recommend them going the junior college route. For the people that are listening, that are wondering why one would pick the junior college route over a 4-year route. Can you talk a little bit about which guys should probably utilize the JUCO and which one utilize the 4-year?
It's kind of personal preference. There's been players that have come on up here late in the, like you just said, those guys just kind of come out of nowhere, late bloomers. And, maybe they were committed to a smaller school. Maybe they were a late commit, because in most cases guys commit years in advance.
Right.
And, they've got some pro attention, but maybe they're just not quite there yet. Maybe, the pro guys say, hey, we like you. We can't go all in on you given what we know. And there's nothing wrong with going to a junior college and keeping yourself eligible for those, after your freshman year, after your sophomore year, especially if you're a qualifier,
right?
Meaning the NCAA qualified you. You can go to a JUCO for 1 year and then switch over to a 4-year from there. Because you never showed up on a 4-year campus. The minute you show up on a 4-year campus and then, maybe they cut you loose or it doesn't work out. Now you got to go to a JUCO and be a 4.24, meaning you got to graduate from the 2-year.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. And I've just seen so many guys who just aren't quite ready for Division I, and they go and they sit on the bench for multiple years before they finally get an opportunity when they could have went to a junior college, got a ton of experience, ton of playing time, opportunity to really develop and grow and mature, and they come out so much further ahead.
Yeah, no,
and like I said, it's not for everyone, but I think it's a really viable option.
Yeah, whenever you see a guy and he's not quite ready, and you recommend him going to a 4-year school so he can develop, see better competition, and then you can see him more. When you see a guy go from a 4-year school and he leaves after that fall, or maybe even after his freshman season and goes to a JUCO, what type of a picture does it paint in the eye of a scout?
We have that a lot because we get, just the area I'm at, we have a lot of really good baseball players, and they get sometimes, in some cases, I think over recruited where, and given the rules that we have, these guys can commit players years in advance.
Right.
And what happens is when you commit them years in advance, you really don't know if they're going to go up or down. And if they don't really become who you think they are, you still bring them in. You have to bring them in because you signed them to a letter of intent. And then in the fall, they ultimately decide, in some cases, some of these schools have 50-man rosters in the fall, and they got to get down to the 35, and they got to cut 15.
Right.
To me, it's never hurt a kid. I've never looked at it as a negative.
Yeah.
I always, in most cases, I know why. Because, as scouts, we see these kids so much and we see where they're going, and we almost make jokes. They're like, all right, plan on him being back, And the JUCOs call us all the time saying, who have you heard is coming back, or who have you heard isn't going to make it, wherever they're at. But it's never looked at in a negative light.
Yeah.
Like I said, for most of the time, I can figure out why.
Yeah.
If it was somebody that was a really good workout guy, he just hasn't quite put it together in game, those guys come back. Or maybe it was the really good upside projection guys that they took a chance on 2 years ago, and now that he's in there as a freshman, he really hasn't taken that next step. He's just not there yet, and there's no innings for him. Yeah. So they end up shipping him back out. You don't hear about it a lot when they turn all these guys loose. Right. We hear about it because JUCOs, it's a feeding frenzy in usually in November and December because they're wondering who's coming back, who can I get in for the spring semester.
Right.
And I've seen it where guys have left and then they go to a JUCO, they kind of get everything together, and then they go back out. You know, they're playing at the same level, or if not even in a better situation. So that's why I say, like, junior college, there's nothing wrong with doing a year or two, because at least in the Midwest, most of these schools are in smaller places. Yeah. There's nothing to do but play ball and go to school, and there's no real rules. So you play you play 30 games in the fall. You got all this time in the world to get your work in. And as long as you're somebody that is motivated to work, I mean, these guys, they come out and they are better off.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I'm from Florida. I went out to Oklahoma and played a Seminole, and man, there's nothing to do out there. And I had the best year I ever had. Though I do think there's some validity to what you just said. What about the guy maybe that's at a 4-year and then goes to another 4-year, maybe same level, same whatever. Does that tell you anything? And again, I know you guys are just looking for guys who are you guys are looking for big leaguers, but does that strike any issue with like the character side of things or the makeup side of things?
No, well, usually we find out why.
Yeah.
When they jump ship, there's been a variety of reasons. When they go 4-year to 4-year, I think usually it's smart. They do that and not go JC because of the academic. The guys that I've seen do it are usually pretty good in the classroom. And when you have that extra, I'll go to JUCO and then I'll go back to a 4-year from a 4-year, the more times you transfer, you just end up losing credits.
Yeah.
So as long as a player is okay with sitting out a year, the ones that do it right are the ones that leave in the fall, because you got to spend a year on campus. So if you leave after the fall semester, then you go to a 4-year, another 4-year at the same level. Now, if you drop, you're eligible right away. Yeah. But if you go D1 to D1, enroll in January, you can play in the fall, just not in competition that following fall. And then you're good in the spring. That's a smart thing to do. But in most cases, we always ask if it's an issue that is a disciplinary thing or you got in trouble. We almost always find out.
Yeah.
And if it's a playing time issue or if you had an issue with the coach, that kind of thing, it's all about just knowing what is it.
Yeah.
If it's a kid that just, hey, there was no innings for you and he wanted to go so he had an opportunity to play, that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. Now you're going to get your opportunity. Go prove it.
Yeah.
It's all about just knowing what.
Yeah.
Knowing the why.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So going back to what we were talking about, the situation with the corona and all that stuff. Let's say you got a guy that you're watching as a senior, or even maybe a junior, and he decides to go back to school for that extra year. How does that help him or hurt him, depending on, what you guys think about him?
So before this came out today, because obviously we're looking at all this right now, we're planning on if there is going to be a draft. So if you were a junior and they were going to award everybody that extra year, so basically you can come back and be a junior again. My pitch to them was going to be, you are a year older, and most of the MLB teams now operate with a draft model, which means they bring in a whole lot of different types of information and they kind of weigh it. And then that will compile a kind of like an overall score. And that's how they line you up on the draft board. Now, if you are older, it kills these guys. And, you hate to say to a kid that's 21, soon to be 22, like that extra year is going to really matter.
Right.
So as much as they say, hey, because every agent, every advisor, even coaches are say, hey, you can come back here and you can prove it and you can get more. Right. Well, it's like, well, how much more from where you're at right now? Because if you're a 3rd-year guy, we have 3 seasons of college, 2.2 of college season. 2 seasons in the summer if they went off and played somewhere. Plus, we have probably some high school stuff. So we have enough information, to pretty much give you an idea of where you could end up in the draft. And it's very similar for the senior. Now, if a senior wants to go back, I totally understand it.
Sure.
I really wanted to play out my last year. I don't want to go out like this. I do think you're going to see a spike in grad transfers, because if these guys are graduating, they're free to go and they can transfer to another Division I and not have to sit out. That part's going to be really interesting because I think you're going to see, especially like a premium, really good Division II guy. Some of these D1s are going to, look for them and try to get them to come to their program. And that part's going to be really interesting just to see how many guys, end up just transferring out. But yeah, I really think that if we keep the draft like it is and the Division I ends up coming with only seniors get the extra year, I think it's going to allow the draft to play out much more normal. I just don't see juniors saying, I want to go back if their stock was already pretty good. Now, if you're a guy that was going to be, 20 plus round, and you said, hey, I'm just going to go back, I'm going to finish, get my degree, I'll come out next year, totally respect that.
Right.
But if you're inside the top 10 rounds and you're going to say, well, I can go back and do more, I would recommend against that. If that's the approach, if it's I want to finish school, I want to play my last year, totally respect that. But if it's all about the dollar and trying to go higher, I think you're making a mistake.
Yeah. I think you brought up a good point, and I think that people need to understand this, is that you're not going off 1 year. You went off their freshman, their sophomore, their high school. I mean, you got years of seeing them develop and seeing them play to know what you think they're going to be. So I think, you don't just come out 1 year and have a huge year, and then people all of a sudden they change their idea and think that you're going to be a big leaguer. There's got to be some consistency. There's got to be some track record there.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a conversation with a dad yesterday. He was texting me about just asking my thoughts. His son pitches in the SEC. And he said, well, we were told he's slated here. If he goes back, and I was like, hold on. Understand if your son pitches in the SEC. That means there's TrackMan on every ballpark he plays. Mm-hmm. We have all this data from all these years. He was in the Cape last summer. Like, if he comes back and he wins 12 games in the SEC, he's got a sub-2 ERA, he strikes out a bunch of guys, yes, he can improve his stock. Yeah. Maybe by a little. But if you think it's going to be that drastic to roll the dice on, because he's already slotted, something pretty decent, then he needs to just go. Yeah,
speaking of that Cape Cod League, there's a tremendous amount of talent playing in that league, Woodbat League. How much can doing poorly in that league hurt a guy? Let's say he played in the SEC and does really, really well, and we all really like him, and then he goes to the Cape Cod League and he doesn't do that well. What does that tell you about a player?
That'd be a conversation to have with the kid, just to say, all right, you've had a lot of success here. Let's just say it was offensively, that he had a lot of success in the SEC and he struggled with the wooden bat in the summer. Then we start really looking at, like, what was your approach there? What changed? How was it hitting with the wood? Because there are such things as aluminum bat hitters.
Right.
So you really got to start looking at when things don't line up, you really got to start to dig in. It's the same thing with like makeup. If everybody on the coaching staff is telling you how wonderful he is, and then you talk to whether it's a strength coach or a summer coach and he tells you the guy's awful or he's a cancer, then we need to do some more digging. And it's the same thing with the numbers. When they don't match up or you see a dip somewhere, let's say like he was a high contact guy in the SEC in the summer, he was a high swing and miss. What was it? What was he? Because, again, in the Cape Cod, they had the TrackMan on all those fields. Right. So, we see all that data. And if there's a high swing and miss rate, or there's a high K rate, did you change your approach? Was it different than what it was in college? With so much data and information, even with these statistics, we can break them down into, in almost everything, in conference versus out of conference, which is a big one for me. I'm trying to differentiate guys that beat up on midweek pitching versus the guys that, maybe they struggle a little bit against the conference starters. So you start looking at all those different things. And that would be something he struggled in the cave against some better arms on a consistent basis, but he hit in the SEC. Well, did he hit on Tuesday and Wednesday against, the mid-majors? Or, was he performing on Friday and Saturday against the better arms that the conference had?
Yeah. Yeah, no, you brought up a couple of things, too, that I want to bring back up for the people that are listening. Again, just like seeing them play the last couple of years, you also do your homework on, who likes them, if everybody you talk to is saying the same thing, then we probably know what we're getting. But if you get the coach that really loves you, and then everybody else saying, he's kind of whatever, because you see that a lot. You see that right now, really pitching guide to the college coaches, or even maybe to some scouts, and then they ask around, and then all of a sudden that guy loses credibility because he's blowing somebody up that's not really what he is. So the homework part and that whole credibility part on the part of the coaches is you gotta be careful with what with what you're saying, because the baseball world's not that big.
No, and it's one of the and this was so go back, everything shut down last week, and then we were told, okay, you're not allowed any in-person visits, meetings, which is something that I don't necessarily know if I really wanted to travel right now.
Right.
But what I started doing was I started doing FaceTimes with all the players. So because everybody's home, there's no school going on right now.
Right. All
the colleges are canceled. So I ran it through by some coaches. Say, can I reach out to some of the players? And I do FaceTime meetings with them, and just to touch base. And on top of that, then it was calling kind of their inner circle, who's connected to them, whether it's coaches, strength coaches, trainers, summer coaches. In some cases we've gone as deep as host families for the college guys, and we looked at it as a time where, all right, we're going to be short on the evaluation side, but let's get the player right. Let's get the makeup right. If we're drafting off of what we have and we crush the makeup, I think we're going to have a really successful draft. And then a few days ago, MLB came down and said, no longer, we're going into a quiet period. You cannot contact anybody, which we're hoping they kind of lift it. But, and of course, my initial thought is, well, those teams that fired all the scouts and have no manpower in the field right now, I'm sure they're not real happy that teams with scouts that could do this work are doing it and they're getting beat.
Yeah.
So the model teams that are driven off numbers and data, I think are really going to be hurting.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm telling you, this draft's going to go through this year. I don't see it getting canceled, and they're going to be hurting. And the teams that really do the work and find out what are these kids doing during this time, and you talk to them and you kind of get a feel for where their head's at. Because I've talked to some of these kids and they're out. They're like, I can't really do anything, but this is what I'm doing on the side just to keep myself ready. So when the game we get going again, I'm ready. Which is what we want to hear.
Right.
But yeah, you have to do your homework on the makeup side. Like I always say, you can miss on the player. Like we're going to be wrong on the player. We're going to say, I thought he was a big leaguer and he turns out he never got out of A-ball. Like that happens.
Right.
For a variety of different reasons. But don't miss on the person. If you miss on the person, that's on you. Like we're going to make mistakes on evaluations. Right. But when you miss on the person, that comes directly down on the scout. That's just not doing your work, not doing your homework. And I can tell you, when you talk to coaches, because I came from the coaching side, like you like your players, you recruited them, you're always going to be high on those guys unless they're, complete jerks and you prefer them not to be there. But for the most part, they're going to be positive.
Right.
And in most cases, they want their guys drafted. It looks good for the program. Totally
Right.
get it.
Right.
You need to talk to people that do not have a vested interest in the player. The strength coaches and trainers are 100% the best people to speak to because they are around them. The NCAA for the college guys, you're only allowed so many hours with those coaches. But the strength coaches, none of that ever counts. So all that time doing conditioning and in the weight room The time with the trainer, it's usually for more pitchers, getting their post work in following, whether it's bullpens or starts. They tell you, they know everything.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable what they know. So that's who usually we go to. And when there's discrepancies, that's when we go deep. And that's when, if it's a high school kid, we call teachers and counselors. If it's a college kid, usually we seek out the summer guys, like whether it's talking to other teammates he had, host families, the summer coach, the summer GM. They always know.
Right.
So, I mean, that's how deep you really have to go, and especially when it comes to understanding the player. And as the more you talk to them, it really builds the complete picture.
Yeah.
I spoke to there's a really good college player in my area who and I reached out to his high school coach, and he really helped fill in the gaps because, the player's a little bit of an introvert. So it's getting him to really open up is tough, but he really can fill in all the gaps for me, understanding the background, the family dynamic, where he came from, and that's so important when I go to present this guy, especially this year. Like, here, let me take you all the way back to when this guy was 9 years old, when this guy started coaching him, and talk about the family background and his development. That really helps.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, but the people that are listening, I've had Mike on a couple times already, and we talk about makeup in depth both times, and we're doing it again because it's that important. And I think, again, you talked again about, it goes back. We're trying to find out as much information we can for as long as we can just to see how you develop as a person, develop as a player, and all this stuff. So it's not like a 1 year thing, dude. It getting as much information as possible and building a picture so that you're a guy that we know we can spend money on and actually, hopefully get a return on.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about the freshmen that are going into college. So we have this issue of the fifth year seniors might be able to come back, or if everybody gets a year, but that's yet to be determined. The incoming, and that's going to be at the NCAA, NAIA, or the NAIA is a little bit different, but in JUCO level, they're talking about that too. So how does this affect the kids that are leaving high school, getting ready to go to college, and they're potentially being able to play or not playing because they're now stuck behind three more guys, and there's more teams. So now you have the roster issue, and then there's only 9 guys can play.
Yeah. So when all this happened, that my first targets were high school guys. So all my FaceTimes, after I created that list, I coordinated FaceTimes with all of them. And most of it was just, they don't know what's going on. And I don't necessarily have all the answers right now, but I just wanted to see where they were at. What's their thought process? What were they doing leading up until the season, until everything got shut down? Can they do anything right now? Part of it, I just want to know, like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen with you, but we're still interested, so almost just reiterate that.
Yeah. And,
in some cases they hadn't heard from their college coaches yet, so they really had no idea. So it was kind of the first one to give them some kind of information, which at the time, all I knew was scholarships are going to go up. So, hey, your money's safe. Don't think you're going to get cut or anything. The roster size is most likely going to go up. But what I led into was, like, okay, you're going into school thinking, this guy's gone, there's opportunity for me here. It's a 35-man roster, everything you already knew. Well, all right, that senior that you thought was gone is most likely coming back. Depending on if it was, that junior that you thought maybe would have been gone, he could come back depending on where, if maybe he was considered a late round guy, maybe he'll come back. And all of a sudden, you're looking going, man, I'm kind of backlogged. So what I've been telling them is, if all these guys start coming back, now at the big schools, my guess is most of them will go on. But like the mid-majors, I think with them all coming back and the incoming freshmen coming in, the numbers are going to be way too high, and coaches are going to be left with little option, but likely to redshirt. I think you're going to see a spike in redshirts,
right?
Because they're going to say, I don't want to burn this kid's year of eligibility on 20 at bats or 15 innings. Let's redshirt them, develop them. We got them for the next 2. But most kids, they don't want to do that. I want to play. I want to compete. So for me, it's been just, hey, I'm not telling you it's going to happen. I think you got great talent. You can go in and contribute. But if the numbers are so high, they may be left with no other option but to say, we're just going to give you a red shirt and we're going to sit out this year. And from just telling it, some of the kids are like, man, I didn't even think of that. Cause that's a reality.
Right.
And I just thought if originally when everybody was supposedly getting the extra year, I thought the high school guys were in trouble.
Yeah.
Now if it ends up being just seniors, they're not in as much trouble. But again, if it's a senior heavy class, that there's 12 seniors and they all decide to return.
Yeah.
I mean, good luck trying to find innings and at bats.
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of the development process is the playing game part, so what you have to understand, if you go to college and you sit out for a couple of years and you don't play the games, it's hard to keep developing, because the game is what matters. You got to produce on the field to show what you can do to be able to play at the next level. So that's why it's tough right now. It's like, all these guys put in all this work in the off season to train and to get better, and you kind of use games to validate what you're doing, what you're working, and what you got to adjust. And now they don't have that, so now they're going back to training. It's like, man, I guess I just keep doing what I'm doing and thinking I'll be all right, but tough situation.
It is. It's really tough, and that's why right away I was like, I got to reach out and to see where their heads are at, and at least try to educate them with what I know, because they really, man, it was crazy talking to them because they really had no idea.
Right.
But at the same time, it's very beneficial for me because a lot of them were doing whatever they could to still get their work in and being smart about it, which shows me some dedication.
Right.
There was nobody I spoke to that said, "Oh, I'm doing nothing."
Yeah.
But it was just hearing how creative they were. One kid telling me how we jumped the fence and I bring a catcher so I get my bullpens in. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to support that because I probably shouldn't. But if that's what it takes for you to get your work in, all right, good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people realize at some point think they're going to get back to normal. And maybe we play this season, maybe we don't. But if we do, and the people who haven't put in work and kept the work going, we're going to see a huge spike in injuries too.
Yeah, that's the hard part, because a lot of the colleges, most of them have their facilities shut down. Most of these kids have been sent home. Obviously, all the other facilities are pretty much shut down. With the weather getting better, at least they can get outside and do some work. But you're right. If we did come back and start playing, like, there needs to be a build-up period, and I think that's why all the colleges finally said there's no reason. Because honestly, this probably is going to extend in almost May. There's no reason to bring them back, and we got to build them up, and we're going to try to play. It just wasn't a reality, and it's very similar on the high school side. Right. In Indiana, we need, whenever we start school, we need 10 official practices before we can play a game. And unless the high school association changes that, I mean, that's, so if we go back on, I think it's right now we're scheduled for May 1. If we practice every day, which we can't do, we're looking at middle of May. So that's where I'm starting to think the likelihood of us playing in high school this year is probably next to nothing.
Yeah.
I do think, like I said, I think we're going to go into the draft given what we know. If things do calm down and we get into May and everything starts opening back up, some normalcy comes in, I do think you'll see some workouts, some organized type workouts.
Yeah.
But like you said, all those, those pop-up guys, those guys that you wanted to check in, you can't. You're going to have to, we're going to target a smaller group, which is why I think also the draft might be shortened a little bit.
Yeah. What's the impact to that, the shortening draft, or is there one?
I don't necessarily know if there's going to be an impact. I don't know, how much they shorten it. I mean, the commissioners talk about just shortening it on a permanent basis. I think ultimately probably wants to get closer to 20 rounds.
Yeah.
I mean, there was once a time where it was you picked till you decided to pull out. Like we were talking about Mike Piazza, I don't know, the 61st round or something. When I started, it was 50. 50 felt long. 40 still feels long to me. I think 30 is probably the best because there's big leaguers back there.
Right.
When we had 50, the problem with 50 was between rounds 40 and 50 were nothing but favors.
Yeah.
They were literally reserved for favors. And, I remember one year I sent a message like, hey, can we take this guy? And, we're like 41st, 42nd round. I said, oh, no, we're set the rest of the way. And every tick was, drafting so-and-so cousin to, former major league manager. And that's fine.
Sure.
But I think 25, 30 is probably a really good number, because I do think, take guys that we think can be, major league players.
Right.
When you get so far down the list, like I said, there's big leaguers back there, but there still is that, we're going to take a chance here, take a chance there, a favor here, favor there, and I also think that it'll create a little bit more free agent type signs, which I think you can always find guys. I think it'll help the independent leagues and improve upon them because they just can't seem to keep growing. So, I don't necessarily think there's a huge impact this year, especially going off the limited amount of data.
Yeah. What's the guy? I mean, the guy that go later in the rounds. The notion is that they're not going to be paid attention to much because there's going to be a lot more focus on the guys who have the money. Is that the case? And if it is, how can those guys, and you see it all the time, guys defeat the odds, they put their head down, they work, and they end up making it. But it almost makes you wonder. It's like, okay, why even go if that's going to be the case?
Yeah, and that's if it's a junior back there, they're going to have a little bit more of a leash. Seniors, I'm very straightforward with them.
Yeah.
Especially late, like you're getting between $1,000 and $5,000. You're going to have, in the off season, this is what happens: is the guys applying for a lot of money, they have a runway where they can just continue to invest in themselves, get work in. When the guys don't sign for as much, got to work, just to kind of survive because you don't make a ton of money in the minor leagues.
Right.
And the bonus babies, the guys that get paid, are going to have a huge leash. They're going to have every opportunity in the world to fail. They're going to be hitting, $120, and they're going to be hitting in the 2-hole every single day. And is it frustrating for guys? Yeah. Or as a scout, you always, if I have a player that's caught in that situation where, like, hey, I don't know why I'm not playing ahead of this guy, I'm better. Well, you just have that conversation. I'm just going to be, straightforward with you here and tell you, he got a lot of money and he's going to get every opportunity to fail.
Yeah.
That's just, unfortunately, that's the business of the game.
Right.
Is it necessarily the conversation I want to have? And do I think it's the right thing to do? No, but guys that get paid are going to get every opportunity ahead of the guy that was taken in a 30th round for $2,000. Now, what I tell them is you need to just put your head down, like you just said, and grind and just keep putting together consistent, productive days. Whether it's be early to the field, get your extra work in, and whatever they ask you to do, you just do. And, I've been pretty fortunate. I've drafted a few guys that were late, that were low money guys, and that were guys that played behind some of them, and two of them ended up playing up to AAA. One of them almost got a call to the big leagues. And, I remember a time when, he calls me and goes, I'm playing first base. I've never played first base in my life. And it's like, well, I can tell you why. Third base signed for $750, shortstop signed for over $1 million, and second base got $500,000. You signed for $40,000.
Yeah.
So that's just the reality. Are you better than all them? Can you play better? Are you a better player? I believe so. But just, hey, you're in the lineup. Keep putting together good at bats. And then eventually, he played up to AAA, and the other 3, I think one got to AAA, and the other 2 never got out of A-ball. So, it's hard, but there is most of the time when you hear about late round guys, I call them overachievers. It's not necessarily anything against them, but it's guys that play above their tools. Guys that play above their tools got great makeup.
Right.
And the guys that I've had that played up to AAA that were later round picks, they have coaches, when they talk to them, they absolutely love him. And in some cases, they say, I hope he returns as a coach one day because he belongs in the game somewhere.
Yeah. So why do you think there's so many guys, even money guys, that can't get out of A-ball? What's happening there?
When you draft a guy high, we pay for tools,
right,
or we pay for stuff on the mound. Now, whether or not they get to their tools, so much of that depends upon their overall makeup. And when they're special players, sometimes they don't have I'm not saying they don't have good makeup as far as just like being good people, and maybe they don't have the work ethic. Maybe they don't have the overall drive, and on the mound, if they have big stuff, maybe they just never quite could corral it. Maybe they just couldn't get in the zone. They couldn't find consistency. Most of the times when guys just fizzle out, don't make it, that were higher end picks that really invested in, they were guys that just never really failed. Like they never had to, overcome much because they're just so physically gifted. The ones that are gifted athletically and have incredible makeup those are superstars. Yeah. Like I always go back to, Jordan Adele, who might, whenever we do start, he might break camp in the big leagues. I think I'm sure if we had started on time, they were going to keep him down for a month. So he didn't get that Super 2 status. But he's going to play in the outfield next to Mike Trout. And it didn't take Joe very long to get through the minor leagues. And there's a lot of questions with him coming out, but he was super talented, unbelievably gifted. But the makeup and his drive was like just an example. Like this kid's in high school. He gets up at 5 a.m. to get his workouts in. So he has more time after school to work on just his hitting. He did meal prepping. I mean, he did everything, lived and breathed it. And, now you look back and it's like, it all makes sense. It all checks out. And most of the time when they get to the big leagues, it's like, well, what was the separator with this guy? Oh, he's an incredible worker. Just so diligent about everything he did. And, I'm not saying that guys that don't have really good makeup that don't make it. There could be other things outside the game that just,
sure,
life changes, whatever, that they don't make it. But I do think, and it's a big one for me, it's knowing, like, have you failed? Especially a really good high schooler. Like, have you failed? And going back to Joe, so his summer going into his senior year, he was at every national event. He played on the big stage every other weekend. He was horrendous at Tournament of the Stars. He still made Team USA because he was just so gifted that you could not take him. But he was bad. Then there was another, Perfect Game National. Another huge stage. I don't even know if he got a hit. BP was great, but I don't think he got a hit. All right. Then we had, I think the next one was the Under Armour game at Wrigley Field. Started really stinging the ball. Then he went out to Long Beach for area code. Another really good one. And then when I called his high school coach in the fall, I said, what'd Joe do in between all these workouts and all these national events? He goes, every time he came back, just went back to work. Never talked about it. Never dwelled on the fact that he struggled. Just went back to work. And he was diligent every single day. And eventually came out of it. So that just, I always use him as a perfect example, of somebody with just unbelievable drive. And every time he failed, he came back stronger. Because you are going to fail in this game, and guys that have never failed, then they do, we worry sometimes that, we could lose them. Yeah. Where they've never failed like this, they don't know how to respond.
Yeah. It's crazy. I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of them too, some really super talented kids, that one have never failed and two, they just don't work as hard. And then you see a guy like that and you're like, yo, if you could just see what this kid's doing and see how he goes about his work, see how diligent he is, you could be that.
Yes.
But it's just interesting how certain kids have that. And you almost kind of wonder where it comes from.
Yeah. And like, I'm talking so much about Joe, I can tell you, his dad played in the NFL. I don't think he ever played a game. He ended up blowing out, got injured, and they basically said it was during training camp, and they said if you go back and try to play with this injury, you may never walk again. So he was out. But his dad got to the NFL, and he knew what it took to work, and I think he instilled that in Joe. Yeah. So I know that some kids just, I don't know if it's the environment they come up in, just work. And the ones I've been around that are like elite workers, I think a lot of it is just that overall environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the people that are listening, working hard is good and it's important. But the tools and skills are too. So you see a lot of kids that work really, really hard, but the tools are just not there, and it's not gonna. And it's a hard conversation to have. But you say, hey, look, you're not capped out at high school. You can go play college baseball, but just being realistic, the tools isn't enough. Just quite.
Yeah, if I got a hard worker, and you see it all the time, kids that really work hard, maybe they just don't have, like you said, the whole tool set, maybe a pro guy. But there's plenty of levels of college baseball where there's a spot for that type of player. Right. And if you work hard, there's no coach that's not going to want you. Because what you're going to end up doing, you're going to make somebody else better. You're going to create a very good culture. Give me a whole team of guys that work hard, that maybe are a little short, just overall talent-wise. I mean, we're going to win ball games.
Yeah. And
love those types of players.
And they make the best coaches, too, a lot of times.
Absolutely. Because now they know how to motivate others.
Yeah.
You need those types of guys. And like I said, those players, they will overachieve at some point.
Yeah.
They will have success somewhere, whether it's on the game, it'll be in life.
Right.
But yeah, if you have a work ethic, you're a quality makeup kid, you're going to make others around. And there's in some cases where if I have like a senior sign where it's, hey, I think this guy is probably an organizational player, somebody can play in organizational levels, but his makeup's so good that, and I'll put it right in my report, this guy will make others around him better.
Yeah.
And when you think of a 22-year-old college kid with an incredible work ethic that pushes everybody around him, and then you put him on the Arizona team with a bunch of 18 and 19, in most cases, a lot of international players that maybe don't know how to work yet, but this kid's going to teach them and he's going to push them, so they understand. So there's tremendous value. I got one of those guys this year, and he's a senior, so he'll have an opportunity to go back if he wants, but if he doesn't, I'm more than happy to submit his name and take him, because I think that's what he ends up doing.
Yeah.
He pushes all those guys around him. I talked to their strength coach at the college. He goes, oh, he's on another level. He goes, I put all the non-workers in his group so he can push them. I'm like, that's all I need to hear right there.
Yeah. So let's say things kick back to normal and we have summer ball. What do you recommend guys playing summer ball, or do we just say, hey, let's get ready for next year?
No, I would go play. If we end up getting back and there's college summer leagues, I know like the Cape put out, they're watching what's going on right now. Like I said, I don't know how we move the draft. I really don't. It's going to screw up a lot of other things. And I think one of the things that's in focus is by moving the draft this year, how does that affect 21?
Right.
And does it make sense to move it this year? Maybe, but at the mercy of jeopardizing 21. Because like I said before, after the draft, we start looking at next year.
Right.
Well, if I got to look at 20s for the next 3-4 months, once we get back, so we can have a draft this year, and now I just shorten all my looks at the 21 class, it's going to hurt me there. So, I mean, I really do think we're going to keep it as is. And I really hope that, everything kind of gets back to normal. and things like the Northwoods League, the Cape Cod League, all those summer collegiate leagues are able to play, get these kids back out there playing, to return to some form of normalcy. And then, same thing with the high school guys. Get back, if you have your travel team, get back to your travel team, start going around to the tournaments, and hopefully we'll get back to our normal schedule of, and then in the summer, start looking towards the 21 group.
Yeah, so the kids right now, they all are just sitting around. Some of them are trying to find ways to get work in. Is the social media a good thing right now for them to kind of post them working and posting their stats and stuff? Are you guys looking at that?
Yeah, I don't want to look at my screen time on my phone, but it's probably drastically spiked in these last 2 weeks. Yeah, because, when MLB came down 2 days ago and said no more correspondence by any means with these players, so they sent out an email to us like, all right, we're basically strapped right now. So, look at their Twitter, look at their Facebook, look at their Instagram, try to find out whether it's what they're doing, what they're posting. Obviously everybody knows, who the Pitching Ninja is and the Flat Ground app.
Yeah.
So, I see a lot of the stuff that players are shooting in to him just to get some attention. And I would say, because before I was telling players like, all right, I'm not telling you to go do anything you shouldn't be doing, but if you have any video of yourself, if you end up throwing a bullpen in your backyard, take video and please send it to me. Cause we're not going to have a whole lot of information to go off of. Yeah. And, since they came down a few days ago, we can no longer do that. So yeah, if they posted on there and provide updates, I mean, everything helps at this point. We really stress reaching out, get in touch with guys, find out what they're doing, what their plans are. If things get rolling, where you set up for the summer, and then all of a sudden they came down and told us we couldn't do that. So yeah, now we're really at the mercy of following their Twitter and, try to get some kind of feel for what they're up to. I do think that this whole quiet period thing will come to a conclusion here, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Cause at some point if we're going to proceed in June, and it's early June,
right.
We're going to almost be within 2 months here shortly. And like I said, I really do think that's going to be the plan. I think there's too much else gets affected.
Yeah. What if you see a guy that like they're really buying into the really big panic mode, and they're like, hey, we're not getting out there. We're not going to do, we're not going to go outside, and do whatever. They're basically stuck in the house. Maybe they're doing some stretching, but there's only so much you can do inside a house. How is that going to change the perception? I mean, again, the guys that you guys are looking at, they're going to put their work in. I mean, these guys don't just give up. But, just for the people that are listening, maybe they're saying, hey, man, I'm scared. I'm not going outside. Screw that. I'll just sit in the house. And when things kick back up, we'll get back to work.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. I totally understand that. And that's when, I was doing my calls with some of these high school guys. I was like, hey, man, be smart about it. But, I mean, they're just so itching to play. And they are, these guys are being smart, where they'll say, I meet up with my catcher and I throw a bullpen at a park field.
Yeah.
Or, I'm in the Midwest. I had one kid, he lives on a farm, and he was telling me how they pull the tractors out of one of the barns and they lay down a mound, and he calls his catcher. His catcher comes over. I'm like, that's awesome. Like,
yeah.
Hey, if you do that, have your dad take some video and send it to me.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing. I think that's part of the reason why they instituted this quiet period. Cause, I think guys are saying, hey, if you work out, or if you do anything, send me video. And they don't want any encouragement of guys to go out, because the scout's asking a kid, go somewhere and work out and send me video.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, that guy's going to go do what's asked.
Right.
And
right.
So I get it why they did it. It is hard. And that's why I wasn't encouraging anybody. It was more of a, hey, if you have anything, because one kid's like, oh, I got stuff from January. Like, yes, please send it.
Yeah.
I just don't go out and do anything right now that you shouldn't be doing.
Right. Wow. Man, there anything else you want to bring up on this whole case, or?
It's a crazy time, and I think a lot of players are just, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I still think there's some things that are going to come forward from the NCAA. Well, that will definitely help as we move forward from this. As far as who can come back, who gets the extra year, who doesn't. How I really don't think anything's going to affect scholarship money, especially for the incoming guys. They are going to have to raise the roster limit from 35. But at the same time, I think it's going to lead to a lot of guys redshirting.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we put 9 on the field. That's it. We can't suddenly play 11 and 12.
Yeah.
So it's just, if you're a prospect, there's a lot to think about. It's definitely a different year, kind of how we're going to have to go into this, and it's just kind of unfortunate given, kind of what everything that's happened, that, some of these guys are going to have senior years in high school and, thinking that, hey, this is my big year that I could maybe try to, improve my draft stock. And unfortunately, they're going to lose that. But the one thing I will probably use going forward, and I encourage it because I get asked this when I meet with high school parents, usually in the fall. They say, what do you want to see in the spring? What does he have to work on? And I always tell them, like, for one, you always know your strengths and weaknesses. The player can figure that out, identify your strengths, improve upon them, and really accentuate your strengths.
Right.
The guys that come out in the spring and completely change their bodies, and they come out and they make an impact right away, it tells us as scouts, it really tells us something. Like, this guy was serious over the winter. This guy really worked, and I think it's the same thing for the college guys.
Yeah.
When I go opening day and I go see a pitcher that I have high hopes for, and he comes out and is just fair, it really just irks me, because if you're truly a pro prospect, you need to come out on opening day like it's Game 7 in October.
Yeah.
And I know most are going to say, well, that's a little much. It's early yet. It's still cold. Like, if you prepared like you should be in mid-season form right there.
Right. And,
because I've seen it where guys have done that. They've come out and it's like, wow, he just made a statement. So I know there's other guys that do it. So when I see one guy do it and another guy not, I know he didn't take it as serious over break.
Yeah.
And if there's any year to use it as an example, it's this year. Because the guys that I did see in those first 4 weeks, that's like ingrained in my mind. Like, one of them came out and was a different guy. And there was another that came out and really underwhelmed me.
Yeah.
And same weekend. But one showed me he worked. One showed me maybe not as much. And I'm so tired of using well, it's still cold. Well, it's still early. The college season, you only got, 14 starts. I mean, come out ready to go. So, it hurts the guy that didn't come out ready. It's going to hurt him a little bit this year. It really is.
Right.
The guy that came out, I have information that he came out ready to go, and he did nothing but get better every single time out for 4 weeks. That's going to help him.
Right. Yeah. Hey, I got a question. What about, is there a case where you would recommend a gap year?
What do you mean?
Like this year, like maybe a guy sit out a year and then go to school next year. Like a gap
that would
year.
That would be interesting. And I would probably just say go to junior college.
Yeah.
Are you talking from a high school?
Yeah, high school. Because the high school rosters are going to be, or the JUCO rosters are going to be full too.
They are going to be full. Yeah. I mean, something like that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Just kind of, and we've seen it where I've actually, in basketball, I think a lot of guys reclassify backwards. We've actually seen it in baseball where these guys are reclassifying forward. But this, and I do. I mean, I think you could do it. I don't know. Because, I think an agent called me about something very similar to that. Just saying, if he stayed another year, right now, going into this draft class, he's kind of like a third rounder or whatever. If he stayed in high school for next year, because he is young and goes back with his normal group of where he should be, he could potentially move up. So at the time I said, no, I wouldn't do it. But I mean, maybe now, if it's like a younger senior that should be probably a junior, it might work for them.
Yeah.
That would probably be the only situation that I would do it in.
Yeah, because I mean the gap year, the only problem with that, I mean, it's great that you're working, but the only problem with that, you're missing out on the games.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I would only, if somebody considered it, it'd have to be he was young for his grade. He would have graduated really young, But then at the same time, if you're a prospect, we like guys that are young. I hear it every year. I was the youngest guy in the draft.
Yeah.
Like, part of you wants to is he any good, or is he just the youngest guy in the draft?
Right.
But that carries a lot of weight. And we're not a model-driven team, but teams that have the model will say that. They're like, oh, our model loved this guy. And it's because he was 17 at the draft.
Yeah. The interesting, people don't, when you tell that to people, they're like, hey, man, I want to start shaving when I'm 12. No, don't do that.
No.
Keep that baby face as long as you can. And when they hear that, they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense, but it does.
Absolutely. It's, when you see guys that are 16, 17 with a full beard and long hair, and it's a great look at that time. But when you're on the other side of the fence and you're looking at him, you're going, where does this guy go from here? That's you're exactly right. Everybody wants to shave when they're young. But I'd much prefer walk into the house and see some peach fuzz than a full grown beard. Ryan Baracchi pitches for the Jays that I signed. I still joke with him. Like, you look like you're 12 on TV. I'm like, when you finally going to grow some facial hair?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And if you are a guy that can grow a full beard, don't put it out there.
Right.
You make sure you shave before meetings and events. And because we joke about that all the time. Like, boy, this guy should have shaved. And you know what? Sometimes going into the spring season, somebody that had a full beard, it suddenly disappears. And an agent got to him and said, hey, you got to clean that up.
Right. Well, you brought up the long hair thing. That's kind of I guess it's always been kind of a big. I remember doing it when I was young. Well, the long hair thing that you said that makes the guy look older.
I think in some cases it can. I don't. It's none of that really bothers me.
Yeah.
When you see a player, I had a player with kind of like blonde dreadlocks. And when I met with him, he's like, some guys had an issue with this. So I don't care. If you go out and hit like you're supposed to hit, you can wear whatever you want. Or, like tattoos now. When you see a kid with tattoos are becoming more people are pretty much okay with them. It's something more common, I guess, you're seeing. But there's some older scouts, when they see the tattoos on the 17-year-old high school kid, they're like, man, you got tattoos?
Right.
It's almost like you're showing some too much personality, or this guy must have some kind of edge to him, when none of that really bothers me. But yeah, there's some guys, whether they they don't like the look, whether it's the super long hair, it's the outgrown beard, or a guy that's got a half sleeve and he's 17. Some guys, they don't care for that, but that's why it's so important just with players. And when I meet with a guy, if he's got tattoos, I always just ask, give me the meaning. What are they? I'm totally fine with it. Right. But yeah, there are some little things that, it's a little quirky, but guys look at when they at least make their initial impression on a player.
Yeah, well, that's just the initial appearance. Just trying to check in as many boxes as possible. And the more boxes you can check out, the better. So maybe some of those things don't check in boxes, but hey, at the end of the day, if they can play, I guess that's all that really matters. And they got good makeup.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Like, there's one kid I had this year. He's pretty much got one arm is completely covered, and I go, man, you got a lot of tattoos. Yeah, I said, well, what do they mean? And he literally took me through every single one.
Wow.
And that's totally fine with me. The only if it was ever an issue is if you ever saw anything that was gang related. That's the only time it would ever be an issue.
What else you got?
Other than that, it's I think that pretty much covers, I think, what we're going through, what high school players could potentially be facing, what the college guys potentially facing, with the draft. I guess my reasons as to why I think they keep it the same. When you look on Twitter, you get a lot of different college coaches throwing their opinions out there. And, at the end of the day, I think, I don't know how, if moving it, I think it's really going to affect the colleges. I think just staying the course, and we've been told that if there's anything that won't change, it's probably the draft. I don't know. It'll be interesting once we end up starting, whenever that is. How does that affect the trade deadline? So if we start on June 1, the trade deadline is July 31st. That's a quick turnaround. That's the thing I haven't even bothered to ask yet, because whenever the big leagues start, their minor leaguers are going to be about a week or two behind them, and we have pro coverage. So how are we going to handle doing some of the pro work? If they keep, I could see them maybe moving the trade deadline back a little bit. And how are we going to handle this shortened season? I don't know. I hope maybe the shortened season benefits us as a team in Texas, only because I think we are better, and I think we're good on the mound. And, keep everybody healthy, especially during this time. You're starting to see a lot of Tommy Johns come down right now. And we'll see. We'll kind of see what happens. My guess is maybe June 1st we can hopefully start playing, but
yeah, I think a lot.
Unsure.
Yeah, I think a lot of the opinions are, a lot of them doesn't make sense because they just don't know what they don't know. You brought up a lot of things today that I didn't even realize. And I think, having known that now, it's like, whew, obviously everything else, the domino effect, everything's a mess. Everything's going to be a mess. I don't really know if they're the good way to go forward, but I think as the information comes down, as we learn more, it's like now we see why maybe what we think isn't really the best option.
Yeah, and that's like when I read all these messages, like, we'll just move the draft back. Well, how does that affect the sophomore eligible guys? How does that affect when guys are off in the summer? And then if we put it in the fall, how does that affect the 21 class? So there's so much more involved than just, hey, let's just move back. No big deal. I don't always agree with everything the NCAA does, but I do think what they did by just granting the seniors the extra year is probably the right move. Whereas if you got, next year, I've heard they're going to move the scholarships somewhere closer to 30. But if you award everybody an extra year, it's not going to be a 1 year of 30 scholarships. How are you going to get back down to the standard 11.7? So it's going to be a 1 year thing. So everything goes back to normal for the following year.
Yeah. I was just having that conversation with Rick the other day, and I'll talk about, man, when you have business as usual and then you just flip things, it's not that easy. And then to go back, it's not going to be that easy. So it's almost like you don't even want to deal with it. It's like, hey, let's just let everybody go, let them off and do their thing just so we can keep things normal.
I think by, saying that it's just seniors only get the extra year, that's what he's absolutely right. Because if you go ahead and say, give everybody, how are you ever going to get back to normal? And that's when I heard everybody, I'm like, there's no way we're going back to 11.7. Maybe this is the time that they finally up it. to a higher amount of scholarships. And one thing that I'm fearful of is, if we do shorten the draft, because the commissioners wanted to shorten the draft before, because he talked about contracting less minor league teams and having a smaller pool for the draft. So if we do that this year, does it, they say, well, it worked out fine. Maybe we should just keep it there. So that's why I'm hoping it doesn't. If it gets shortened, we at least don't keep it there. Because, once we do it once, then it's like, well, hey, maybe we'll just continue with that. So I'm hoping that's not the case, because there's a lot of good players out there, like I said, that go from rounds 30 to 40 that play in the big leagues at some point in time. And they might not be, superstar everyday guys, but they contribute in some way.
Right. What about the independent guys? I know you guys keep an eye on those guys.
Yeah.
Right?
There's always, in some cases, they're there for a reason. There's plenty of times when I've gone and a guy comes in and the first pitch he throws 95, and then 10 pitches later there's 2 walks, and then that, like I said, it tells you why he's there. Now there's also guys that maybe have a history of whether it's struggling with command, or maybe they didn't have a second pitch, but they make an adjustment and all of a sudden they find it. Or maybe they were a guy that played at a small school that never got any opportunities or looks. You can find good players there. One of the things agent has reached out to me about was, hey, because they're usually starting late May. If one of their guys, if he goes there, say it's a junior, just so he can get seen. I think it'll come more into play if they push the draft back. But if they don't, I don't think it's worth the time, because you're just not going to play that much.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the independent leagues, there's always something there. There's guys that come out of there and end up getting signed and maybe get into the big leagues at some point. We see it every so last year with the guy with the Twins, and they do a tremendous job of seeing players and finding guys in the independent leagues. But if the draft gets moved back, I could see guys going that route. Because once you sign, though, you give up your amateur status. So for me, it'd be more juniors.
Yeah.
Maybe a senior that's graduated just wants to move on. The problem is, they have to change the languages. So every time you go and take a player from an independent team, I think it's $5,000. I think it's $5,000 now. So if you buy them out, you got to pay the team $5,000. And so if what
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking more guys would maybe try to take advantage of that route, but knowing that now, again, there's the knowing that you don't know don't know part, and that's interesting.
So
I didn't know that.
I've had it where it's in a standard year, a senior would say, "Hey, I got an opportunity to go pitch for so and so in the independent league, but if I get drafted, will that affect me?" And what I tell them is, and teams are always good about this. They just put the language in the contract that if you get drafted, you are free to walk. Because if we draft you and then the team says, well, it's going to cost you $5,000, we're just going to pass. They won't even bother. Or we'll tell the player, unfortunately, he might have to cover it with a signing bonus. So that's, and most of those teams, they do a nice job of just saying, all right, if you get drafted, you're free to walk, but you'll be here I got 2 starts for you. So. And if they don't get drafted, they got an opportunity there. But that's the one tricky thing about indie ball. We do have to pay them out. We do have to buy them out.
Yeah. The guys that are seniors that maybe they'll listen to this. We talked earlier about the age thing. It used to be like 26. If you're 26, you were too old. What is it nowadays?
If you're starting your career in minor league baseball at 23, that's like the average age of a AA roster. And that's just help put it into perspective a little bit. If you're 20, and you play 23 in A ball and you come back 23 or 24 next year and you're in a full season club or a low A or high A, you're considered old, and when, scouts show up to scout that team and they start looking through the roster, age is something that stands out, so if I'm scouting high A, I see an 18-year-old and 19-year-old, like, all right, that stands out because he's young for this level. And then you got a guy that maybe he's hitting, but he's old for the level. It's like, all right, I got to do a little bit more work here. But yeah, age is a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's become a young man's game. What you start looking at some of the big leaguers coming in, I mean, they're 21 and 22. I mean, the Braves, obviously last year with their middle guys, I mean, they're like 20, 21 years old. So, and go ahead.
Then you have your, what is it, the lifespan, like you have 4 or 5 years in the minor league, typically. There's some guys that are special and they get up there faster, but for the average Joe, you have your 4 or 5 years. If you're 24, you're 28, you're 30 years old by the time you get there, now they're not going to waste that when they got another 21-year-old that's ready to play and give them 10 years.
That's exactly right. You come up at 28 and it's great. But you're almost viewed as a veteran at that point. I don't know what our average age is this year, but when they started looking at that these last years, I mean, some teams it's 27 years old, 28 years old, and that's the average. So when you are the 28-year-old, and you're the oldest, you're like, how am I a veteran at this age? But like I said, it's really, the game has gone very young.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with someone the other day. He said that I don't think you ever see a 20-year player again. Do you agree with that?
I still think you could, but I could understand why you would say that. Because if you get like some of these guys, some of these Latin players that that signed at 16 and they did their 4 or 5 years, they come up at 20, 21. Could they play out until 40? I think the likelihood is there's going to be much fewer than what it used to be. And you could say, well, the guys that were doing it then used the enhancements, and I just it'd be, like I said, I can understand why. You're not even seeing those guys getting those types of contracts. And the ones that are your Harpers that came up at 21, 22 years old that are getting paid out till they're 38 or 39. But that's what it's going to take. Guys coming up that early. Nobody's playing in their 40s like they used to. Right.
Do you see any more of these big contracts? Could you kind of start to see maybe that trend going away? The big contract. You think you see any more of those coming? Like will Mookie Betts beat the Trout and stuff like that? Do we see that happening?
Not like
anymore, really.
I still think you're going to see them. Obviously, I think what's happening more now are the club-friendly type deals, which I can imagine the Players Union doesn't like that because they probably want to get the average overall salary higher. And when they take these club-friendly deals, the average annuals, it's more club-friendly, it's much less. But I do think you're going to still see those long deals for the right player, nowhere near what we used to. I mean, I remember was the late 90s, early 2000s. The Yankees seemed like every big star that hit the free agent market was like 8 years at 200. Are you going to see that? No. If anybody seems to get that type of money, it's probably going to be a Boris Client because he did it last year with many of his guys. But that's a very small pool compared to what it used to be. And we do a lot of work on, do those contracts pan out? And they honestly, they do not, and that's the hard part. And, if you really want to get the player and you think he can help you win a World Series in the next 2 to 3 years, then you do it and you eat it on the back end. You don't, but the return is never works out. I mean, you can, when I worked in Toronto under Anthopoulos, Alex had there was a rule. There was nothing over 5 years. And when we had Batista, that's what he got. He got a 5-year deal. And his belief was nothing over 5 years ever works out. So it remains to be seen with some of these 10 and 13-year deals, and it's hard to say that would. I mean, these guys are a little bit younger taking those on, but again, in the back end of their career, they're going to be producing at that clip. It's remained to be seen. But I definitely think it's going to be less.
Yeah, you brought up a point, with Boris. When you go to a player and they say, "Hey, I have an agent like a Boris or something like that," that obviously you got to take that in consideration.
Yes.
Will it be enough for you guys to pass on?
No, we never shy away from Boris clients. Most of his guys tend to go to college unless they are frontline top end of the draft type guys where they're going to go in the top 10 picks and they're going to sign for whatever the slot is. When I go through my signability calls going into the draft, I can talk to almost all the agents. Boris is the one company that I never call just because they really only deal with the scouting director and general manager. Because they got the top end guys, and we understand from just previous years that he's going to hold a conference call with the scouting directors, and he's going to explain kind of where they see their guys fitting, and if we see it on the same level as them, then it's a possibility of a fit. If we do not see the player where they see him, then 100% of the time will not happen. But they're very
interesting,
very straightforward. You need to be on the same page as them.
That's interesting. Well, oh shoot, it's already been an hour and a half.
A lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah, no, I love. I can do this stuff all day long, man. I love this podcast platform to talk baseball all day long. Well, Mike, I'll kind of respect your time and I'll let you go. But I appreciate you sharing, man, and thank you.
Absolutely. Always enjoy it coming on. I always enjoy listening to the other guests. You got some great guests on here, and just kind of I always say, like, paying it forward, bringing people on that talking about the game and talking about their experiences. And for those listening, there's so much you can pick out from each person, and apply it to some form of your life in the game, whether it's, infield instruction, it's hitting. It's great that people are open to talking about the game, because that's one thing for me.
Yeah.
The most I've ever learned is when I've had those conversations, sitting down and just tell us, whether it's a baseball story, just talking scouting, talking player development, anything. That's where I've learned the most. You had Kenny Graham on, and my first instructional league was in 2010 with the Blue Jays. They sent me down just to basically throw BP and hit fungos. And, Kenny was a hitting coach there. And the amount of information I learned in that 1 week I spent was incredible. I mean, Kenny was there. Yeah. Anthony Iapoce was our minor league hitting coordinator, who is now the big league hitting coach for the Chicago Cubs. Our infield coordinator was Mike Mordecai, who, I grew up watching back in his Braves and Expos days. Yeah. And you just start the people that I was around, and I learned because they were open, so it's, you got this platform and people come on and they tell their stories and talk about whether it's different drills, different things they teach. I mean, you can learn a ton of stuff.
Oh, I started this last January, and man, I've got a Word doc on my computer of just bullets that I learn, and this page is let me pull it up real quick and see how many pages it is. Yeah, this is 268 pages already. You just learn so many things, and I go back to it quite often because I work with guys, and I take stuff that you say and say, hey, look, man, I didn't make this up. This is what, I like to tie everything back to, hey, there are a lot of people out there that are really, really smart, a lot smarter than I am. I'm just sharing you what I've learned.
And that's what it is. It's just taking it and applying it, find what you like and passing it forward. Smart ones will listen. And it's good you pull that out. And sometimes it's like, all right, fine, this is what a big league hitting coach said. I don't know anything, but this is what he said.
Right. No, it is. I mean, because again, you get with a player, like I have a player that been with me 5-6 years, and at some point it almost becomes like you're like a dad, and they've heard it enough. Okay, well, hey, look, this is what Kenny said. This guy, he's the director of play of operation for the Tigers. Oh, okay, and then it reignites the whole curiosity.
Absolutely.
So, well, all right, man, I appreciate it. I'll keep you in the loop. I'm looking at next week. I'm gonna get this one out there so that guys can, figure out, kind of what you think the plans are and what they should do.
Yeah, that's. Hopefully you get some good feedback on it. At least gets people thinking. There's options. It's just figuring out what's best for them right now.
Right.
All right, man.
Dude.
Thanks a lot.
I appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you.
Yep. Have a good one. Yep.
Well.